Aloha, and good morning, and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where every week we discuss topics, issues, bills of concern with members of the House Majority Democrats. With us this morning, we have Representative Cedric Gates. Gates is the chair of the Culture, Arts, and International Affairs Committee, and he represents District 44, Waianae, Makaha, Wakua, and Maile. Welcome, Representative Gates.
Good morning, James. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to start our discussion this morning talking about COVID-19, and due to the pandemic, the Capitol is closed. So testimony on bills is submitted online. The hearings are all live streamed to provide access. How is that going for you so far? And are you seeing any benefits from using Zoom to testify and posting the hearings on YouTube?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that our Capitol is closed. You know, it's a beacon of democracy for our state. And, I really enjoyed when our community was able to attend committee hearings and so forth. With our COVID situation and the testimony now being online, I think it can be a benefit for my district specifically, given that on days it takes me 2 hours to get into the Capitol. So to expect constituents to drive in a 2 hour drive to testify on one or two bills and then have to head back in same traffic that they came in, I think that alleviates some of the pressures from constituents being involved in the civic engagement and the discussions that are taking place at the legislature. I'm hoping that we will see over the period of time that more constituents will participate via Zoom and provide their testimony.
Yeah, it takes a little time to get used to it, but I see what you mean. That is a benefit for someone who lives on the far side of the island.
Correct.
Now, in your district, which stretches from Waianae to Makaha all the way out to Kaena Point, what are your priority issues for your district?
One of the most important priorities for me, is getting residents back to work, really dealing with the economic issues that we are having during this COVID-19. And even prior to COVID-19, the cost of living has been a major factor for a lot of residents on whether they stay here in Hawaii or find a new place to live because the cost of living is just too high. So dealing with the issue of housing, as well as those that are experiencing homelessness on our coastline, is very important. I would say the number one priority, though, for my community right now is transportation infrastructure. As I said earlier, it takes sometimes 2 to 3 hours just to go one way out of our community or go the other way. And I personally have sat in 4-hour traffic just getting home from the Capitol. So really trying to figure out how do we push for a secondary access road into our community, and working with DOT as well as DHHL on how to create a win-win situation where we can develop a secondary access road possibly through DHHL property, which would allow for more beneficiaries to access DHHL lots, because a road would now be created where there was no road to access parcels of land. So those discussions are taking place right now, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to address it in the very near future.
That would have a double benefit. It would not only benefit the residents there and access to homestead land, but help get transportation moving again.
Correct.
Now, as chair of the Culture, Arts, and International Affairs Committee, what are the priority bills for that committee this year? What are you thinking along those lines?
So for my committee bills, one of the things that we want to try to do is reconnect to Polynesia as well as Oceania. I think one of the things that the legislature has focused on is creating a lot of sister states with a lot of different countries outside of the Pacific. And what we want to try to do is bring that back home and try to connect to, say, Aotearoa or Samoa, for example, creating some sister state relations in there. One of the cool things that we're doing is working with Polynesian Voyaging Society to create a new license plate to support their future voyages in the future 2024 and 2022. And we're looking at how we can empower our culture practitioners to be more involved in government and to provide input when it comes to projects in our communities.
So that plate would, you purchase the plate and the funds go to help benefit the Voyaging Society then?
Correct. Just as was done for the volcano in Hawaii Island, when they had the recovery, they did create a license plate to go to the recovery effort. So that's going to be basically how it works for the Polynesian Voyaging Society and Hokulea's license plate.
Now, just a few weeks into this session, it's really just started, but can you say so far, what you hope to achieve this year? I know budget's tight, but what do you hope is going to happen this session?
I really hope that we prepare ourselves for what's coming down in the future from the federal government. I think, ensuring public health as a state, making sure that it's safe for our residents, but also visitors coming in. Also, of course, our economic recovery, and really hoping that we can get businesses back up and residents back to work, as well as our students who are on Zoom now, right? And hopefully we can create an environment that they can return back to our schools safely, and that, that can be a big relief for the parents who are struggling to make it every day.
How is the Wi-Fi connection out there for students? Does that need some broadband work, or are they pretty well connected on the coast?
I think there are still a lot of pockets that do not have access to internet, and that's why I'm supporting legislation moving in the Capitol right now to broaden broadband connections for our residents out here. And I think that's one way we can contribute to making sure that we can still have a quality educational system while being in this hybrid mode and in this Zoom learning style that we're dealing with right now.
And we're all hoping this additional federal funding passes too, so that
Correct.
we can get more funds to people.
Yes.
Well, it's been great talking to you. We love to hear from the West Side and what you're doing, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and you have a great day. Aloha.
Aloha.
Interested in speaking up about which laws make sense for Hawaii? Want to really get active at the state legislature? Make sure that you've set up an account on the legislature's website, capital.hawaii.gov. All that's required is an email address. Then you can receive email hearing notices for specific bills or for certain committees, or submit written testimony and sign up to testify remotely, or set up a measure tracking list to keep on top of bills you're interested in. Need help? Contact the Public Access Room at 808-587-0478 or par@capital.hawaii.gov.
Five, four, three. Aloha. As you can see, we're broadcasting today's program from my home in respect for the Shelter-in-Place Directive, so that you can meet the people who continue to make a difference in our everyday lives.
And the winner is...
And the winner is...
And the winner is...
Aloha, and welcome back to the Senate segment of Live at the Legislature. Today, I'm joined by Senator Glenn Wakai. Senator Wakai represents Senate District 15, which includes the areas of Kalihi, Salt Lake, Aliamanu, and Foster Village. Senator Wakai is also the chair of the Senate Committee on Energy, Economic Development, and Tourism. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Jacob. And first of all, congratulations on being a new daddy. What a blessing to you and your family and to the community here in Hawaii. Congratulations on your
Thank you, Senator.
son. Oh,
Thanks,
welcome.
Senator. You know, COVID-19 has had a detrimental impact on our state's economy, and especially on your district. Your district includes many small mom and pop shops, but you've been a big advocate for them during this pandemic. Can you talk about your bill, SB 946, which aims to prioritize commercial rent relief for monies received through federal funding? And can you talk about why this bill is super important?
Well, Jacob, you know, the pandemic has really decimated our community. And you see on the daily news the infection count and unfortunately the death rate here. But what we don't measure oftentimes is the perishing rate of businesses here. And the state has done a pretty decent job. I know there were some problems at the get-go for unemployment insurance benefits, but we've doled out more than $1 billion of assistance to people who need to pay rent, mortgage, electricity bills, and their daily food, going through their daily lives. But what we haven't really paid attention to from the state level is the strength and vitality of our businesses. So this bill that you refer to, Senate Bill 946, is to provide $180 million of rent relief to business owners to help pay for their commercial rent. And this is predicated on the federal government giving us money. So this is not going to come out of what's called the general fund here or local taxes. But if the federal government is going to be our tooth fairy and give us a whole bunch of money like they did last summer, we're hoping that with this bill, we can pull out a portion, $180 million, to help businesses survive this pandemic. Because as we try to get people back to work, I mean, they've got to have businesses to go back to. And once a business dies, it is very, very difficult to revive them or put another tenant in the place of a commercial space.
Thanks. Yeah, and Senator, your district, which also includes the Sand Island area, is home to many critical businesses that are super important to our state's overall economy. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your district in other ways? Your district also includes the Kalihi area, which is home to many middle-class working folks. And how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted them?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I have Kalihi, Salt Lake, and Foster Village right by the stadium, a real blue-collar, middle-class community. So when businesses go out of business, then those folks just don't have any kind of economic opportunities. And, especially in the Kalihi area, there's a lot of small businesses, a lot of warehouses, distributors that either half of them, I would imagine, are no longer in existence. And we got to make sure that we do our best to keep the other half in existence. And also in my area is the airport. And, that's the economic lifeblood for the state. So at one point we were talking about over-tourism when we had 10.5 million visitors. Last year we had 2.7 million visitors. Now we're just crying like, please come, but come safely. So that's the problem with us trying to balance between public health and economic vitality is one seems to always hurt the other. So as we try to bring in tourists and bring them in safely, their lower numbers affect tourism. And in a certain way, government has impacted people's ability to be entrepreneur and be profitable. When we shut down businesses, when government says, okay, only half this restaurant can be utilized, that's government's responsibility, in my opinion, to help these businesses, because it's government's responsibility for hurting businesses to the extent that we have.
Thanks, Senator. Earlier this week, 6 former Air Force officers from Hawaii were sworn in as members of the new U.S. Space Force. Many have signaled the aerospace industry as a future economic sector due to new innovations in STEM and Hawaii's strategic location. Another one of your bills, SB 935, would establish the Office of Aerospace development in the Hawaii Technology Development Corporations. Can the aerospace industry really be the next big thing for our state?
I think it should. I mean, when President Trump announced the idea of a space force 3 years ago, I thought like, what? That's kind of crazy. But to his credit, it was actually innovative. And if you think about it, surveillance of today is not going over on a mountain and looking over and saying like, oh, what's going on over there, right? Surveillance is satellite technology and using ground communications to figure out like what the potential enemy is doing out there. So I think it's actually kind of a smart move to have America lead in space, not just for defense and military purposes, but I found it amazing that all of us live off of this, right? Our mobile phones, and right now we need 20,000 satellites to satisfy our appetite for Wi-Fi, right? So we can watch Netflix and go buy stuff on Amazon, whether it's in Hawaii or whether it's in the middle of the Sahara Desert, we want to have Wi-Fi access. And Hawaii, because of our proximity to the equator, is the best place in America to launch satellites into space because it takes less fuel because we're moving faster than any other state in the nation. And one day during your son's lifetime, man is going to colonize the moon. I mean, it might sound crazy, but the man is going to get to the moon. And as man practices to get there, he's probably going to want to practice on the Big Island with its lunar volcanic surface. And of course, we know that we have the best set of telescopes on the planet on Mauna Kea. So all of those inputs, to me, makes Hawaii the perfect place for us to be global leaders in aerospace. So we really should stop looking at our location as a disadvantage and figure out how is Hawaii's isolation and unique position to our advantage. And I really think that aerospace is one of those areas that we should be paying far more attention to.
Thank you. And we have just over a minute left, but I really wanted to touch on this topic. You were in the news recently regarding what some are calling Brennan's Bill, a measure that proposed a mandated requirement for businesses to post signs and information in the workplace with instructions on what to do when someone has a seizure. Can you speak briefly on this bill? Because I know this bill is very special to you personally.
Well, what I love about the legislature is we get a master's degree in everything. And to be honest, before the session, I didn't know too much about epilepsy, but because of this young boy named Brennan Yamaguchi, who goes to Marino, he's taught me a lot. It was his kindness where he wanted to help out his friend. His friend has epilepsy. And he came to me and says, how do we educate the public about how to, treat someone who's having an epileptic seizure? And keep in mind that epilepsy is, sometimes it's hereditary, but sometimes it's because you got a stroke, you got into a car accident, even perhaps COVID, they're saying might lead to epileptic seizures. So right now, about 15,000 people in Hawaii suffer from epilepsy. And if someone was having a seizure and on the ground and perhaps shaking a bit, I really don't know what I would be doing to respond to that particular medical condition. But the bill would mandate that in workplace environments, kind of in the break room where you see kind of labor law descriptions, you would have a signage there, a poster that talks about how to respond to an epileptic seizure. So really, it's a 12-year-old boy's kind-heartedness that has led to a bill being introduced and hopefully a law come May.
Thanks, Senator. Time has run out, but thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you folks at home next week on the Senate segment of Live at the Legislature. Mahalo.
Aloha.
To bring you into the Capitol this session, all the hearings and briefings are being live streamed on YouTube. You can watch them in real time or catch up on them later when it works for you. Find the House and Senate YouTube links on the new Live and Demand video page. Just go to the legislature's website and click on the Live and On Demand video button and see for yourself. Need help keeping up with what's happening at the Capitol? Contact the Public Access Room for more tips.
What are you doing? We have to go. I'm gonna be late for work.
It's Tuesday morning. I gotta record Live at the Legislature on Alelo. Senate and House leadership discussing what's happening at the state capitol.
So just watch it on the news tonight. Come on, let's go.
Hey, this is like getting the news before it's news. If only I could get this remote to work.
There. Can we go now?
No DVR? No problem. Watch Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. on Channel 49.
The Public Access Room has some great handouts to help you make sense of the deadlines that govern the action here at the Capitol. In addition to our color-coded session calendar, our Which Deadlines Apply to My Bill document can help to keep you sane. It's a handy chart that helps you find which deadlines you need to focus on for a specific bill, depending on the number of committee referrals it's received. Find these handouts and more under the Current Legislature tab on our website, and call or email us if you'd like help.
Aloha and welcome back to our last segment of this week's episode of Live at the Legislature. Joining us for this segment is another GW, not Glenn Wakai, but Representative Gene Ward, joining us from his office in the Capitol, and he represents District 17, which spans from Wakai to Kalama Valley. Rep. Ward, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Kyle. Hey, you're pretty sharp today. You know, I never thought of Glenn Wakai and Gene Ward as the same, but that's good because I'm going to quote Glenn with my opening statement. He said, we all have a master's degree because we have to do so many different topics. I thought that was genius, but some of the things, to be honest with you, I don't think we even got out of elementary school with some of the bills. But generally, we've got to be really knowledgeable about a lot of stuff. And I like what he said about aerospace. It's a no-brainer. We've got to capitalize on it.
So we'll start with that in a little bit. I guess it's worth noting that the senator did give props to the previous Republican president for his work at the Space Force. Did you have any comment on that, being part of the House minority?
Being that Kauai is one of the, I think, 3 or 4 places in the nation that we have. I mean, we should build on that. We should monopolize on that. But the aerospace in the private sector, space tourism, launching of satellites, all that stuff is just sitting, waiting for us. And as you know, Kayo, I've said a number of times, you know, so far economically, we've lived off our good looks. Now we got to start using our brains. Start using our brains. That's where aerospace, the Space Force, etc., are like, hey guys, how can we capitalize on these strategic advantages? And sometimes we're sitting on our hands, just waiting for stuff to come to us, rather than we going out innovative, creatively, entrepreneurial, and say, guys, we can do a better job. We haven't done that yet.
So aside from, obviously, you and the senator have similar views on aerospace and also share the same initials. We're at a very divisive time in our country's history. Obviously, the political rhetoric is very charged and whatnot. So how do you see your role here or within the Hawaii legislature where people from both sides of the aisle can work together during these challenging times?
I think generally in Hawaii, rather than like the mainland, we've probably got along much better. Of course, there's been a supermajority and a super minority for a number of years, but I think one of the best things we can do is support each other's bills. I think people should know that I came out with a tweet, an Instagram, and I called it a robust kudo for Representative Sylvia Luke because of her bill 1299 to basically sweep all of the funds from the special funds into the general funds, because this is something that, as a member of the Finance Committee before, we were waiting to happen, and only, I think it was the Tax Foundation that Loa Kalapa proposed years ago, because we had so many special funds that we actually allow them to do what otherwise we're supposed to have control of the spring. So supporting everybody's bills and ideas and not feeling that, oh, you're from a different party, therefore you have a different perspective. And you also know, Kayo, I introduced a bill that says employers cannot, on the basis of an employee hiring or firing, use that based upon political affiliation. Every demographic heretofore is off limits. You can't say anything about gender, sex, marital status, age, et cetera, except for political status. And we've become too polar based upon what I call it the Jerry Springer internet. People are just being at the lowest common denominator of American culture. and just calling people names and being just too rude as a general way of civil society acting a little bit more polite. Not that we have to be Puritans and the Elizabethan kind, but we should be a little bit more circumspect on the way we use our mouth, words, and tongue.
Absolutely. And transitioning to this session, you serve on, being in the minority, you serve on 6 committees. The chair of Culture and the Arts was just on the first segment. So what has that been like to be on 6 committees?
That means being 2 places in once. I'm supposed to be actually in the committee hearing right now talking about the COVID shots required to get here, and then Kauai having a difference, wanted to get a shot 3 days later. But hey, it's exciting. This is where, if we don't really show our mettle to the people of Hawaii, we are in a crisis mode, not only because of what we have is a pandemic of which we got to get rid of. We've got an economy that needs to be open. People are not working. They're hurting. They're kind of on top of each other. They're sort of at each other's throats. We've got small businesses that are dying, that are crying, and I got a lot of hope in what Glenn Wakai has said, and how we can hopefully not push them over the brink. And then lastly, we got a huge budget deficit. So this is a time that we've got to deliver, as we are the representatives of the people of the state of Hawaii. So I feel a particular burden. So 6 committees, not a big deal. I mean, look at Senator Favela. He's got 17 committees. So mine is a cakewalk.
Do you feel like we're at a good place as a legislature, as a state, as far as what issues we're addressing and the priorities so far?
So far, I would say correct. Some of the stuff that is going to be a hard road to decide is, the minimum wage, unless it comes down at the federal. Some of these things we just got to postpone. We've got to wait. There's not going to be much money to do much of anything, particularly some of the NGOs have been standing and waiting to see if there's going to be any grants and aids. That's probably not going to happen. What we've got to do is, again, get that pandemic thrown on the ash heap of history, as I call it. We've got to be able to vaccinate, and we got to be able to test. And I feel one of the things that we're really falling short on, and that's creating a new pharmaceutical industry using our own oceanit that's got a test for 10 minutes, and for $20, we can do bubble testing. We can make all the teachers test it with all the students, and they can feel secure with one another and not just wait for the vaccinations. So we're coming along okay, but the test of the pudding is in the tasting. When we sign IDA, what's the date? End of April. We're going to get out early this time. It'll depend on what we've done between now and then that will really answer the question you've just asked.
So we have about minute 15-ish left. One thing I think which would be good to sort of keep going on throughout the session is a message of hope. You had given the governor kudos for mentioning that in the state of the state. Talked a little bit about it last week with our previous segment. So Rep. Ward, what would you say gives you hope moving into the session and for the rest of the year?
It gave me hope that the governor mentioned hope 5 times. And that was, I was expecting. The only thing that he didn't do is give us timelines. We got to give people a sense of when we're going to get out of this. But the basic point of not being discouraged is, look, remember who you are and who we are. We are Americans. We've gone through this stuff before. We've had trying times from the beginning of our country to the middle of civil wars, Vietnam Wars, etc. We can get through this. And I don't want to be mushy about saying we can do it together, but look, with the discipline that's been going on in Taiwan and Hong Kong, they've got the pandemic kind of pushed on the side. Their economies are back open again, Australia, New Zealand. We can get through this, but right now it's a lot of juggling back and forth, states' rights, personal rights, et cetera, et cetera. We just got to kind of bite the bullet and get through it, but remember who we are. And that's why we can get through this. We're Americans, and we're in Hawaii. That should be a model on how we can get through this.
Absolutely. Great perspective as always. Rep. Ward, thank you for joining us in the middle of your busy morning. Thanks again to everyone at Olelo, and to the viewers at home, we will see you next week.
Aloha.